Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Blowback Roundtable. Every time I say morning, I realize it's only morning for me. Ben Toth is in Pech, Hungary at 6 p.m. there. Ian Cummer is in Moscow, and I forget. I want to say 7, but it might be 8.
I think you're right.
It's 7. Yes,
it is 7. Okay, Jeff Brown coming. He's our special guest today. Is Jeff Brown? He's coming from Normandy, France, and I believe it's 6 p.m. there. Carlo Parcelli is in Washington, D.C. It is noon Eastern time. So thank you guys for joining us. We entitled today's episode, Biden's Big Boy NATO Summit. That, of course, is in reference to Biden doing a great job introducing Zelensky as President Putin. And I think we might have a clip of that. And we can
Sure. We can start there if you like, because this was, this was puffed up by, Sullivan, Blinken, even historical spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre, as there's going to be a big boy press conference. And it was late, an hour late, and it only lasted 50 minutes or something. But he managed to screw it up so bad that this was when he introduced little Zelensky.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. Big President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway.
I'm better.
President,
I'm better.
You are a hell of a
Biden #1, which, by the way, Olga Bazova, one of the greatest Russian trollsters, made a wonderful video. Because, Putin is living rent-free in the minds of these 32 NATO members.
Now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
I mean, really, it is enough of that. There's a couple of other clips because he also called Vice President Trump his vice president.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah, Kamala Harris. He also said he listens to the advice of the commander-in-chief, where most people are going, I thought that was you. Who the
well, he referred to himself as a black woman.
Yeah,
that's also true. He's the first black woman in the White House or something like that.
He's the first black woman president. Yes, he's.
I mean, it went. This is a 75-year-old birthday for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So, but it looked like a funeral, by the way, in the Carnegie Mellon Hall. I think it was dressed up really dark colors, and all of this was fitting. And I just want to share like 2 pictures that came out of this that I love because. Yeah, he's lining up all the vessels, and this was my favorite #1, which, by the way, I don't know this guy. I forget his name, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. But This is South Korean President Yoon, Miss American Pie, singing in the White House, the Zelenskas, and Fumio Kishida. Yeah. So that's a very, very Pacific lineup for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Yeah, no, that's an odd one.
Yeah, and the second one that's just making the rounds today is this one, which I love this.
Maloney.
The Mellon can't police.
And there's Orban, and there's your president in front, or your prime minister in front there, Ben.
Yeah, true. He
was there, one of my favorite politicians.
Well, we are actually. I'm here mostly to listen to you, but I'm very proud of what he did because after this, he didn't even shake Biden's hand. I don't think they spoke. He just fucked off to Mar-a-Lago, Florida, to meet with Trump, which was his 5th station of his peace mission. So he didn't care at all for all of this. So that's the broad outlines of what I could find. I actually checked the communique. I don't know if there's more than one, but the official NATO communique, there isn't a single hard commitment in there. Yeah, 40 billion euros for next year. Maybe here's the get out clause. What do you call it? An irreversible path for Ukraine into NATO. No commitments, no time frame, nothing.
It's well lit, Ben. It's a very well lit bridge. So Biden was supposed to hit that out of the park. Everything was set up. He's reading from the transcript. He's got a transcript to read.
He's got cheat cards.
He's got a double dose of the military grade meth. So, he was really supposed to nail it. And, that was the best he could do. It was really pathetic. But Jeff, we did want to get to you about what's going on in France. I mean, you guys are having a little bit of an election debacle, not unsimilar to what we're experiencing in the United States. Can you give us a?
We can transition to there anytime, but I thought maybe people had some thoughts about the NATO summit, what this represents.
I think we should seek into the French elections, and we can even go into the American, because the parallels are uncanny between the American election and the French election. So I think the NATO conference was. It was a declaration of war against China. Biden specifically came out and gave a warning to China that the United States will not tolerate, and blamed everybody. Blinken blamed China. Biden blamed China. Everybody and their dead uncle blamed China for their abysmal losses in Ukraine, claiming that China is providing the necessary equipment to Russia that is giving it that competitive edge. And I am sure that, between us girls, I think that China is probably providing a lot more to Russia than they want to officially say, just as North Korea is providing a lot of artillery and small arms and everything else that they can to Russia now that they have their mutual defense treaty after Putin's visit to North Korea a couple of weeks ago. But this is a declaration of war, and as China has plausible deniability. They just say no, we're supplying nothing. And so as long as that continues, as long as China doesn't fess up and say, yeah, we're supplying,
I'm with you, MK,
missiles or whatever to Russia, there's that diplomatic dance that they do to not admit it. But it's pretty clear that they are preparing to go to war against China, and I would not have said that. I mean, all last year and the year before that, I was sitting there going, the United States, after the disaster in Russia, they're not that stupid, but they are, and they will go to war against China, and which is quite interesting, because Ella and I are moving to Taiwan province in September, but we'll be up in the foothills away from the coast. And
wow.
And so there's 400 military bases in the Pacific alone. U.S. military bases in the Pacific alone,
yeah,
pointed towards Russia, pointed towards North Korea, and pointed towards China. And the United States, for the last couple of years, has been stocking South Korea with arms, using it as a weapons depot. The United States got caught maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago experimenting with bioweapons on South Koreans and got caught. So we know that the United States has bioweapons in South Korea. I've reported on all this. It's my understanding, and no one wants to talk about it, but that Taiwan is also a cesspool of U.S. bioweapon research and stocking bioweapons.
As was Ukraine. Yep.
Yeah, as Ukraine, and they're building up what General Douglas MacArthur called Japan as Japan as America's unsinkable aircraft carrier after World War II, and then they've got the Philippines, Bongbong
Marcos Jr. Yeah.
Jr. Yeah, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. He is apparently, like Zelensky, a cocaine addict. And so the United States can tell him to do whatever he needs to do to get his fix. And, including adding 4 new bases that the United States can take control of. And it just so happens that 3 of them are in Luzon, which is
in the north.
Is that island in the north that looks like an octopus head, and where Manila is. Manila is just south of these military bases, but they're as close to Taiwan as you can get. And then they have another base that they're going to take over on Palawan, which is an island that sticks out like a thumb, which is as close to China as the Philippines can get. And they tried to send some anti-missile systems there. They were supposedly sent back as a dog bone to China, but you have no idea whether they're telling the truth or not.
Right.
There were pictures of them, showing that they were, that they had arrived and they were there, and and then Taiwan and Taiwan province has islands that are very, very close to mainland China, the People's Republic of China, as a quirk of history after 1949, when the United States escorted Chiang Kai-shek and the fascist government and eventually a couple of million Chiang Kai-shekers to Taiwan, and Mao was getting ready to invade Taiwan and was getting ready to take these islands that are right off the coast of, literally, Jinmen is 2 kilometers. It's 2 kilometers from Xiamen. I've looked at it. You can practically see the people walking, the cars driving, on Jinmen, and unfortunately, and I think it was no accident, the United States with South Korea triggered the invasion into North Korea, which caused Mao to stop taking over Taiwan and these islands. So you've got the Matsu Island, you've got the Matsu Islands up in the north, along the Fujian border north of Xiamen, but the worst are Kinmen, and there's another one, I forgot the name of it, and it's literally 2 kilometers from mainland China, and it is Taiwanese territory. And there are now a couple of hundred U.S. Special Forces there.
Yeah, this is a couple of months old news.
Yeah, and they're there, and they are. Remember how it all started in Vietnam? Well, they sent 500 Special Forces to Vietnam back. Eisenhower did, and so this is ominous. The United States keeps approving arms sales to Taiwan. They keep goading the Democratic Progressive Party, which is the separatist party that is pretty much managed by the United States Department of State, to do inflammatory things to piss off Baba Beijing. And so the war theater is set. And not to mention, in Australia, they've got a naval base. The United States has a naval base in Darwin, Australia, which is that thumb that sticks up in the northeast corner of Australia. There are supposedly nuclear weapons there. We can assume that there are submarines in South Korea and there are submarines in Japan that could very well have nuclear weapons in them, and claim that they do not have nuclear weapons on Japan, just parked next door to it. And they could also say the same thing about South Korea, although they officially say they don't. But and so the deck is set, and I think I just saw a wonderful talk that I think his name is Shakur Mahbubani or whatever. He was the former president of the United Nations Security Council and a Singapore diplomat and scholar.
Oh, he's an excellent diplomat.
Yeah,
I know who you mean.
Really amazing. And he just gave a speech saying that the United States feels like it has 10 years to do to China what the United States did to the Soviet Union in 1990, and they are trying desperately to destroy China. So I don't think the Chinese have any illusions about what's going on.
On that point, before we transition to any new topic, I'd like to just share with you that this made it into the actual communique, the NATO communique, that the People's Republic of China's continue to challenge our interests, security, and values, which doesn't matter, that they continue. And I think Stoltenberg called it the prime enabler of Russia's war in Ukraine.
He also came out with an inflammatory speech too. They all did.
Yeah, something like that. And just so you know, Global Times, which is the main newspaper of the Communist Party of China, this was the 9th. So this kind of preempted. They already knew what would happen, I think, at the NATO summit, because they already had this big op-ed piece worth reading to full. And already they talk about these lies and trouble stirring. And officially, Wang Wenbin, the spokesperson of the foreign ministry, already said that we don't want any NATO provocations or lies. I mean, that's not strong in the world, but within Chinese diplomacy, that's as strong as it gets. I would have sanctioned every NATO supplier. Not getting a chip, you're not getting raw resources, nothing. But from China, that's strong. So at least we can say they took note of this in a serious way.
Jeff, I wanted to ask you. Go ahead, Ian.
I do maybe take issue with the assertion that this means NATO wants war. I mean, what, in your opinion, makes this different? What they're doing, because you did give a very detailed description of what's going on in the Indo-Pacific. What, in your opinion, makes this different than previous Cold War containment policies, or even what happened in Ukraine, provoking the other side into attacking first? What makes this look like actually wanting a hot war?
Well, that's a good question. This is not the Cold War. Back then, there was the Soviet Union and NATO facing off, principally, in Eastern Europe. Since then, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has thermonuclear weapons, multiple entry, missiles that can not only take out the west coast of the United States, but also the east coast of the United States. North Korea, Russia, and China and Iran all have hypersonic missiles. Even the West has no hypersonic missiles to date that are usable. Iran is right there with them. In fact, I call Iran, Russia, DPRK, and China the Asian Quad. And I think they really believe, and and there's a lot of credence in the what Mackinder's island theory, that if you can control if you can control the Asian continent, you control the world, and the U.S. has lost that.
Yeah, the
So
heartland theory.
Yeah, the heartland theory, and I think they're just, I think they realize this is it. You know, the Ukrainian thing has turned out. They thought, I mean, they're so full, they're so megalomaniac and so full of hubris and and racism against Slavs and Asians. They thought that Russia was going to fold like a house of cards in 2 weeks, and that they were going to be able to do what Hitler couldn't do, and that is take back, Russia.
Greatest miscalculation in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just now they're now a high-income country. Russia's now a high-income country.
World Bank.
Yeah, World Bank. Russia is now has a bigger economy than Germany. The ruble is stable. I mean, they're just going from strength to strength. They now have a defense treaty with North Korea. I think that's also another thing that just scares the shit out of NATO.
Let's add to that the Chinese are also in Belarus doing joint military exercises.
So I'm not sure Ian's getting the answer he was.
Well, but I'm just saying.
I see where Jeff is going, though.
It's just that this is it. I mean, they are going to double down. They're going to double down on the only game plan that the West knows is 3,000 years of war. And that is not going to change. And I always joke that Western leaders and Western military leaders have reptile brains. And this is all they know is just expansionism, enslavement, exploitation, extraction. This is all they know, and they're not going to change after 3,000 years. And I think that they, I mean, I've actually heard, what's the guys, the minister, the Department of Defense leader, the black guy, what's his name, Austin.
Austin, yeah. Lord Raytheon.
Yeah, Lord. He's even said publicly, we can handle China. We can
chew gum and what the fuck at the same time. I don't know this American.
So I think they're deluded. I think they are megalomaniacs. I think that, I mean, these people are really Dr. No. Stanley Kubrick's Dr. No. I don't think they're attached to reality. I don't think they know what they are getting into. So I don't know if I've answered, but Ian, I don't think they can turn off. The West cannot accept not controlling the world's resources. And if you want to get into some dialectics, it's the only way capitalism can survive. Capitalism cannot survive without perpetual war.
I'd like to have a go at that too as well, Ian, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Quickly.
Yes.
Because they had to line up, not just the 32 member states, but these they call it Asia Pacific, which is also extremely racist. Nobody in the region, Indo-Pacific, nobody in the region calls it that. To show we're not alone. You see, we have everything we've purchased in the last 30 years. So all the vassals are here, on US time, saying we're not like just a lone voice. It is a last toss of the dice, as Jeff would put it, but it's incredibly desperate. And I think it's showing the incredible US weakness that we can't just we couldn't handle the Houthis alone. So we need to put these people who are all very nervous, because if the US fortunes fall, their fortune falls with them. And just on that note of the racism that is still in them, you probably know the outgoing High Representative of the EU, Mr. Gardner, Josep Borrell Fontelles. There's one more clip I do want to share with you. It's quick, it's 20 seconds, and this wasn't at the NATO summit, I don't think, but just check this out.
To some African countries, and you see people supporting Putin, supporting what Putin is doing in Donbass, saying Putin has saved Donbass. Now he will come to Africa and save us. what kind of intellectual process is behind this kind of attitude.
And he did. Did you see the hand gesture? Like, what kind of intellectual?
Crazy.
That's all the Africans completely. I just don't know what they are removed from reality. That's for sure. But go on.
And no context. That statement had no context. I mean, it was empty.
Oh, absolutely.
That's very telling.
But they're stuck in this, is I think what Jeff's point was. This is the way it's always been. We're 75 years old. Many times they said the strongest alliance in the history of the world. They have to say that. It's more of a PR exercise than anything else. But I wonder if that answered Ian's question.
Well, no, because both sides of the aisle, both the anti-NATO, both the multipolar crowd and the pro-NATO people, the pivot to China is a very big. I mean, it does get a lot of media attention. I'm not convinced. I don't see a lot of evidence for it because, I guess my question, the way I'd phrase that question is, what would that look like? Because if China does not attack Taiwan, I don't see another plausible way for war to start. And while the USA at least pays lip service to the one China policy, which they do, I don't really see a provocation that would compel China.
A false flag. Look at the Gulf of Tonkin.
Sure, but what is that game? What is that going to look like?
Ian's saying until that happens, he wouldn't characterize it as a declaration of war, but definitely what NATO is doing is an escalation. I think he's just maybe taking. Thinking that a declaration of war is a little too overstating the case.
Okay. Implicitly declaring war.
They're leaving their options open. There isn't, it's not like they've sealed themselves on this one course, right? So the West right now could definitely say, okay, we're going to cooperate instead of, facilitate a conflict. But they're taking steps towards conflict, and they're not taking steps towards, cooperation.
Yeah.
Jeff, I wanted to ask you. Well, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I guess my point is that would require a pivot because I don't see the USA fighting China and Russia at the same time. I think even the most pro-NATO person in the world doesn't truly
that does seem
believe
suicidal.
that.
It seems very suicidal.
It seems like diverting. I don't see anyone even suggesting diverting attention away from.
Well,
imagine how nervous you would be if you're Kaja Kallas or Donald Tusk or these people, seeing this development. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Go ahead, Carlo.
Let me just interject. What about we go back to World War II and Japan and the way that they were goaded into essentially attacking the West because they were denied their oil, which they have none of on their own land. And that kind of situation could arise here with the advent of all of this base structure by the U.S. in the Pacific and the AUKUS deal and the pivot toward Australia that the U.S. is making now. Yeah. It could ignite that way. I just want to toss that out.
Japan's economy is still thirsty, highly dependent on energy imports, so that's still the case.
The one thing that makes me, be inclined to agree with Ian is a lot of people don't know that since 1960, what was it, 61? Yeah, since 1961, China and North Korea have had a mutual defense treaty. Yeah. So that means that if there is a hot war precipitated with the United States and China, guess what's going to happen? 1.2 million Marxist-Leninist, highly ideologically motivated North Korean soldiers are going to storm across the 38th parallel. What are those 25,000 U.S. soldiers down in Busan going to do? That to me, that just shows how utterly detached from reality the Western leadership is. And I do want to say, Ian, I can't pull it up. I'm so impressed with Ben's with Ben's gizmos. I'm outclassed, but I do remember Janet Yellen saying, the Secretary of Treasury of the United States, saying that the United States can financially support two wars.
Yeah.
By the way,
She
there was a
did say that.
European bankers meeting like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago before this NATO thing, where Jerome Powell was there, and it wasn't highly reported, but he says, no, we cannot get into any more debt at this point. That was Powell, very.
He's talking about expanding the social safety net, though. That doesn't apply to war, Ben. Come on.
Of course, I'm sorry, I'm not American. I don't know this.
So,
Jeff, I wanted to stop you like after your third sentence when you started talking about China and ask you, let's talk about the kind of support that China's giving Russia. So it seems to me, and I saw a good statement from a Chinese spokesperson that said we are fully in compliance with World Trade Organization rules, and that there's already international laws defining how you become an active belligerent, or how you actually support a belligerent, and that China is following all the rules. They are not giving Russia, anything that can be considered illegal or contraband, due to the fact that they're in a conflict with Ukraine. And so the U.S. is kind of expanding the definition. They're changing the laws. Of course, we know that the U.S. has this rules-based order where the rules are whatever the U.S. says it is. But the actual laws that exist, the U.S. is ignoring them and expanding on what they mean to accuse China of being of supporting Russia with weapons and war material. When now you made the statement that they might be doing it off the books. They could be doing things behind the scenes, but what they're doing, on the books is like circuits and things like that are totally legal, processors, under World Trade Organization,
microchips and that kind of stuff.
Yes. So China definitely resents this accusation. They say it's more of the rules-based order where they're changing the rules to suit the situation. And and also, we've got some commenters. So MK was saying he doesn't think that Russia gives anything to China, or China or DPRK doesn't give anything to Russia. And then Brian was wondering, what about support? At least they are giving support in a number of ways. I mean, I think MK is talking specifically about weapons and military.
What is, not even support, MK? What's MK?
That's his name.
Yeah, one of the commenters here.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Or her name. Sorry.
His or her name. Sorry about this. But I'll quickly add that what China does is trade. It is the manufacturer of the world, right? The factory of the world. And if you take a look at this graph, it's from 2 years ago via the Colonial South China Morning Post. This is the U.S. dependence, the U.S. weapons, including all the big corporations, that radars, cruise missiles, everything is dependent on Chinese parts. So all they have done is, okay, don't give anything to Russia. But China isn't yet under complete secondary sanctions. And they say, well, you can use these, then they could stop the entire NATO, the U.S. war machine dead in its tracks if they say no more exports to you. So it's kind of, I wanted to add that.
And the U.S. military just asked for an exemption to be able to use Huawei around the world, because they are finding that they cannot, do empire with all of the countries around the world, because all the countries around the world except the West have Huawei. and so now the Pentagon is asking for an exclusion to be able to work with Huawei around the world. So it's just crazy. Can I before we get back? I also want to advocate for what Ian is saying. There is one thing that is a certainty. It will not be China that takes the first step.
Absolutely.
It would have to be something, a false flag, goading the president to declare independence. I mean, I can tell you that Biden and the entire Congress could visit Taiwan together, and all China would do would be to bitch and complain, and and show the people, their citizens, that they're standing up for their lawful reunification of Taiwan. But they are not going. There's 200. Okay. There's 200. There are 200 special forces 2 kilometers off the coast of the People's Republic of China. China's sucking that up. They will do anything. They will do everything to avoid a hot war, because they realize that their development program, housing, health, medical infrastructure, finances, roads, ports, everything that they're doing for the people, education, science and technology, all that would be put on somewhat of a hold if there was a hot war. So it would have to be triggered by either Taiwan taking orders from Washington, or Washington, doing a false flag like a Gulf of Tonkin, or the Mukden incident when the Japanese blew up a train track in 1937 to justify invading the rest of China and starting their march down south. So, but I just think that they only, this is all they know. This is all they can do. They have no imagination. They have no flexibility. They are like Tyrannosaurus Rexes, and all they can do is just plow forward with war. That's all they've ever done.
I think everyone here is in total agreement with that analysis. I was hoping maybe I could get your opinion on the following. It's a very contentious issue on social media, and I've noticed that certain, for lack of a better term, pro-Russian partisans who probably are pretty wary of the communist ideology and are wary of China, really, just like Maria is expressing here. So Maria says, and I think what she's saying is she doesn't see any support from China for Russia. And I totally disagree. I know Ben disagrees.
Yes.
But and I know you disagree, Jeff, but I've tried before to explain why I disagree, but I would like to hear you maybe give the case for the kinds of support that China is giving Russia, and for how these two are very tight, and how they both understand the geopolitical stakes, and they've learned from the Sino-Soviet split, et cetera, et cetera.
Let me just throw something in briefly.
Okay.
What we're missing part of is that you have a tank in Russia, and it requires all kinds of metals and all kinds of source material. And China is shipping that source material that can wind up as part of a tank at the other end of the production process. So that they dealt these source materials forever. So I just want to throw that out. We can't, I can't name the source materials. Some of them are rare earths, but yeah. I don't know what those.
Those are in Russia, though. So components, manufactured components. You're right about that.
Yeah, that, but not even manufactured. I mean, raw materials. The U.S. has taken it down to
That's
raw
all
materials.
in Russia.
Yeah. With the thing with military technology is that it's supposed to be a closed circuit. If there's a weapon that requires imports, that actually kind of defeats the purpose of the weapon. It does need to be a closed circuit. So I don't think it's, not saying that there's no imports from China at all ending up in Russian weapons. I'm not saying that's not true, but they don't need Chinese imports to make weapons. It's a self-contained industrial complex.
Military industrial complex is pretty efficient, pretty self-contained. Jeff, I'm sorry. You want to?
Yeah. Well, no, I just want to. Let's go to the other extreme. 25% of China's military arms and weapons and missiles are now being made by robots. 1/4 of China's military production is being made with robots. I can't prove it, but I read an article that they have an underground nuclear bomb-proof factory, 100% driven by robots, that can crank out 1,000 hypersonic missiles a week.
1,000?
Yes, 1,000. And the United States can't make that many in a year. Now, let me just play the devil's advocate. Russia sends a guy, sends a guy with a briefcase so that they can't capture it, on the internet electronically. He arrives in Beijing with the total design package for the Kinzhals. They're one of Russia's hypersonic missiles. Here, build these for us. And China is the only country in the world that could do that, and it would be untraceable, because if they put everything in Russian on it and the whole bit, and China is one of those countries that could do a turnaround on something like that, really, I think it's bullshit, says MK. But I'm just playing the devil's advocate, because China has that capacity to do that, and there are thousands of trains going from China to Russia every year now. There are bridges, all across the Amur River, roads and railroads going across the Amur River. I'm just saying, it is not out of the realm of impossibility. And so, is that I get that right? It is in the realm of possibilities. So, I think China has been supplying North Korea outside of the sanctions because of the terrible economic plight that the sanctions did, and the Chinese and the Russians have been asking to remove those sanctions, and of course the United States will never remove them. And so there's railroad tracks and trucks and everything going across, the North Korean border, with China. I'm sure they've been supplying North Korea with badly needed supplies. So I'm just bringing up a hypothetical. I'm not saying it's true, but
I agree.
But they do have the capacity to do that level of sophisticated arms building really, really fast.
I'm with you. They can do that for themselves, though. Can I quickly respond to, now that I know that you're Maria, and Kondorskaya is a fantastic fucking name. I think you're in Moscow the same as Ian is. Remember when the mother of all sanctions was dropped on Russia? It was supposed to be a pariah who can't trade with anyone. And suddenly, you're probably a good eyewitness to this, that the European cars left and everything's filled with BYD and Chinese car brands, I think, in Moscow. Someone needed to buy all that oil, all that gas that now goes to Turkey, China, and India. I mean, Modi gave the big bear hug too. So there's other ways of support. I don't think Russia needs men or equipment to fight its wars. I think that's been, since Soviet times, as Ian said, closed loop. Everything has to be made here. That's our fundamental principle. But there's many other ways of support, including diplomacy, economy, multiple ways that I think China has eased this. I don't know, shall we call it a transition from, world pariah, sanctioned to hell, to a thriving economy,
I disagree with Ian. I think those source materials, they're coming from China. They've got a large border. It's easy to ship them. China has access to them, sometimes as a proxy, and to ship to Russia. And I would say shame on China if it's not supplying Russia with what it needs.
That's my feeling.
Shame.
I think those go into fridges and boats and cars and phones. I don't think they go into the arsenal.
Well, the thing is, the the thing to remember here about Russian-Chinese trade, it has gone up. However, Russia has a trade surplus with China in their favor. It's not a huge, it's not like Poland. It's not a huge trade deficit. China doesn't have like some huge trade deficit with Russia, no, but Russia does have a trade surplus in their favor. They send more to China than they receive in return. That's just.
See, I think there's a proscription against this. People don't want to agree with that, but on the other side, you have NATO and the United States. All of that crap, all these people with all the criminals that were just a few miles from me today, maybe, and the other day, they're supporting Ukraine.
You probably know the Carnegie Mellon Hall, right?
So what's wrong with China shipping stuff to their ally, Russia?
That's true. Tit for tat.
None. And they should do it.
Let me ask you this.
And Russia needs it, they should ship it.
Wait, Jeff has a question.
What about the reports that North Korea, which is a very maybe not as automated as China, of course, but they have very, very sophisticated arms and military technology. What about reports of North Korea selling Russia artillery shells and machine guns?
Well, that's got more. I mean, I would say that story is more confirmed. I didn't see anyone in Russia denying it. I mean, but that's the same. I mean, that's no different than NATO buying shells from South Korea, which is why it's so funny to me.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that, of course, artillery shells, they're very low technology. Machine guns are very low technology, but
I would see it as a Russian policy because North Korea the reason they exist as a state at all is because diplomatically they've been very good at staying on good terms with both China and the Soviet Union and Russia. But, from Russia's vantage, so they get, because, that is stockpiles of shells that are just sitting there, and no one said what exactly North Korea is getting in return. I mean, they could be getting some sort of migrant worker contract, but I think what's going to happen is they're going to get some Russian technology. I mean, I think that's a very likely outcome, and that's going to not be great for NATO's position if North Korea can boost their missile technology. Like, imagine if they had hypersonic missile technology for their alleged nuclear arsenal, or imagine if they had better air defenses, there's a lot of things Russia could do to make NATO sweat in that region. I'm sorry.
Remember, Shoigu went there before Putin, and they talked about joint space tech. I thought that
and Kim visited the Russian Space Center with Putin and near Vladivostok.
Yeah, there was
during
one, I think.
It was. He went and saw it, and there was a tacit agreement that they were going to work in the aerospace technology field. So, and the North Koreans are savvy enough that they could actually put it to good use.
I think one thing about Russian policy, and I think us Westerners can misinterpret it, because one thing that's been very good about Russian diplomacy, and I'll mention their diplomats receive a far higher and more specialized education than ours do. Compare Blinken with Zakharova or any of the other, or Lavrov or any of their diplomats. But big thing is they're very good at approaching other countries as equal partners, regardless of how big or influential. A Russian diplomat will go to Serbia or North Korea or Cuba, tiny little countries, and it's just equal partners for something. But at the same time, we should not interpret that as weakness, or that those little countries are doing Russia a favor. It's the reverse. Russia is doing them a favor, though that they don't. What the difference is, they don't rub it in their faces like the USA does constantly with the Philippines. Like, we're just this divine benefactor to the Philippines, protecting them from Chinese aggression, and just. But at the same time, we shouldn't misinterpret the gesture either. North Korea is the big winner in that arrangement with Russia. North Korea. It's probably a godsend for North Korea, because we have to remember too, is that when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a famine in North Korea because there were so many those imports went away, and there was a famine. So that those sanctions basically being ignored now is a huge benefit to North Korea. I think we're going to see the fruits of that in time.
Yeah, and
So
that
I
diplomatic
would
approach-
make the argument that if I'm talking to somebody who is skeptical of China, somebody who doesn't think very much of China, and maybe is all in on Russia, but doesn't really think China's doing enough or doing what they should be doing. I mean, I would just reject that entire premise, and I would argue that the government of Russia is probably best served by China not coming under the target of Western imperialism for as long as possible. So as long as they can push that time frame out, that the U.S. really engages in economic embargo or starts a hot war with China, that's going to be better for the anti-imperialist bloc.
And to add to that, while constantly spending money, sending all their interceptors, spending all their shells and everything, while China is still free to act in the world.
So Russia doesn't need any help from China. There is nothing going on right now that is where they really need China's assistance. And if China was just for no reason to start pumping in tanks, Chinese tanks or whatever, that's not going to help Russia. Russia doesn't need it. And that's going to immediately change the global dynamic. It's going to accelerate the march towards World War III. And that doesn't serve humanity's interest, right? So there's still a chance that Russia and China, it's a very slim chance, can make it clear to the West that they need to cooperate instead of march towards conflict. But I think what these Russian partisans who are skeptical of China are demanding China do is just to accelerate this march down the road to World War III and just get there quicker than is best for humanity. And humanity is best served by not doing anything that's provocative. And for a long time, China was really interested in going along with the Western order, going along with the rules-based order, and adhering to more or less all of these sanctions, the sanctions against North Korea, the sanctions against other countries. And China was going along. They were playing ball with the Western global system because they were benefiting from it and they weren't being attacked. But as soon as, it's clear what's going on, that Russia is a stepping stone to fucking China. Like that's the thing that everybody knows. And so, with that reality, China is not going to keep going along with these things, but they're going to be responding to the West, and it's the West that's going to determine how fast we march to World War III. And China is not going to take any provocative step that is going to force us down that road or along that path. And so, I mean, I don't know, does that make any sense?
I don't think Russia is a stepping stone to China. I think
I saw you shake your head there.
Yes, it's. Okay. I mean, it's a goal within itself.
I just want to say, I think it's a little naive to think that China is not trading with Russia for materials that they need. And I agree with Ian's characterization of Soviet diplomacy as well as current Russian diplomacy. Because when I was in Moscow, I got up early one morning and I walked down to Red Square. And off to the left, there were two groups of people. So I went gathered, maybe 100, 150 people gathered in a circle. So I walked down toward them and I got into the crowd, and I have no Russian, so I couldn't understand what was going on. But there was a young African student in the center of the crowd, and there were 2 or 3 Russians arguing with him. It was the Yeltsin years. And a guy came up to me, tapping on the shoulder. I see you don't have any Russian. You want me to translate? I said, sure. The young man was from Burkina Faso. A year after Thomas Sankara had been assassinated. And he was saying, no, you cannot lean toward the West. They will fuck you. They will fuck you in the ass. Nah, he didn't use that language. That's my language. But anyway, that was what he was saying. No, we have to stay the course. but the Russians were so enamored with this promise of Western goods and all that that they were countering him. It was a very interesting discussion, and there were like a lot of people gathered around listening to it. Very well informed, more informed than I was, for sure. And I think that's kind of emblematic, something that's missed about Russia and the former Soviet Union, and even
Russia's
the
still
Yeltsin
that way.
years, is that that kind of discourse took place. But so I give Ian big marks for that. It's true. I think it's very true. I think it goes all the way down to the people themselves. I don't know.
I think at this point,
or not.
no, it's a good anecdote from the Yeltsin, as in the worst years. I'd like to go back to, I don't think we can avoid with this goddamn summit, the case of Ukraine, because, I mean, they mentioned in headline after headline that Germany is going to get hypersonic. As Jeff mentioned, everybody informed says the US doesn't even have a successful test of
I think they maybe had one.
They had a success. Sorry.
Yeah.
I remember there were 3 failed ones, I think. You know, okay. But from getting there to getting them to serve, it's not. So they have this, but there was also a lot of nervousness and backtracking. Remember, Keir Starmer said that you can use our weapons, the Storm Shadow missiles, anywhere in Russia, and then the Department of Defense of Britain said, no, just Crimea, not the Russian Federation. The Poles said, maybe we're going to shoot down Russian missiles over Ukraine. And apparently now they're saying, no, it has to be a joint NATO decision. Backtrack. What came out of this were alliances with the heavyweights, Luxembourg, 900 armed personnel, and Romania, and no NATO membership. So if I was Zelensky, I would be getting really, really nervous right about now, because it looks like a PR exercise with a lot of nervous people just to stave off the collapse until November. And if I was a Southeast Asian leader, I would be getting even more nervous to get aboard this goddamn train. I mean, what was the one commitment that came out of this? We're going to cobble together a couple of air defense systems, right? Patriots, which have been there, 3 or 4 of them at least. The even older 1950s Hawks, the SAMPT, the whatever, we're going to do whatever we can find, we're going to send. And just before the summit, the eve before the summit, you know, they kept using this children's hospital bullshit. But we saw that Russia has free reign in the air over Kiev, over Lvov, over Western Ukraine, where these defense systems were supposed to be concentrated. It's just more of the same. And what was it, the Einstein quote, you know, expecting different results. Yeah. And there's nothing in there. Yeah, sure, let's talk about F-16s will be the game changer. The Russians are eager to see those fucking F-16s because they'll burn like the rest. But it's very desperate. And I think it's like dressing up a losing hand to say we're just as tough, you know, as we were 10 years ago, 20.
So you think they're just trying to make it to the election, Ben? They're trying to, and then...
I think there was a lot of, I'm still in the driver's seat. The US, we still have these powerful alliances. There was a lot of on camera. I think there was a lot of that.
Jeff, what do you think about the American elections?
Well, you know, there has not been an honest election in the United States since George Washington. The U.S. Constitution, what is it, Article 1, Section 4, virtually guarantees corruption in the election process. All 50 states must individually come up with their own plan to guarantee that the people can vote. And once political parties started forming in the 1840s, then if that party ruled Illinois or that party ruled West Virginia, then they can do whatever they want to make sure that the elections favor them. That doesn't mean that it doesn't always work, but that doesn't mean that it always works, but the elections in the United States are corrupt. It's built into the system. I mean, there's all kind. You know, even John F. Kennedy got elected in 1960 when or 59, whatever it was, against Nixon when Mayor Daley in Illinois, you know, they needed 25,000 votes to carry Illinois, and they found a bunch of boxes full of ballots for Kennedy, and Kennedy beat Nixon because of that. LBJ was one of the biggest thieves and one of the biggest election thieves in U.S. history. And then you look at what and of course the worst was 2020. That was so flagrant. Brett Redmayne Titley and I both kind of went back and forth with each other. We did a lot of research on the elections and on that election, and it was so fraudulent and so disgustingly fraudulent. And of course, January 6th was a Democrat false flag to keep the legislature from questioning the vote. There were 19 House of Representatives, and there was a quorum. I don't remember the exact, but there was a quorum of Republicans that were ready to question the vote in six of the key states that were robbed. That's why they pulled off the Democrats pulled off the false flag on January 6th. It stopped the vote. It stopped the legislature. So elections in the United States, maybe my school district at my local precinct level is not crooked, but you get up to maybe my my city mayor, at least in Oklahoma, may not be crooked, but you get up to the federal level and it's extremely corrupt. Not to mention now you can't get in any race in the United States without spending literally, together they're going to spend over $10 billion on the election this go around. I think
so selfish. Why don't they think of Ukraine?
To be honest with you, is bad. I think one of the reasons that Biden is so cocksure that he needs to stay in the race is because the Democrats are going to do the same thing that they did in 2020. They're going to steal the damn election. And now almost every state is hard drives. Nobody does paper ballots anymore. I don't know. Oklahoma has an electronic reader, but again, that can be rigged. I mean, it's not like I'm sure in Hungary or Russia, you take a piece of paper, you put it in an envelope, and you put it in a plexiglass box that everybody can see. We'll get to France though, because there's still a lot of corruption there. But you control the microchip on those hard drives, and you can make the results come out to whatever you want. And I don't think there's been a change in the state houses since then. And I think that they'll still rig Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. Which one am I leaving out? I think there were 7 of them. You only need to win. You only need to win 5 or 6 swing states to win the election, because we know California is going to be Democrat. We know New York's going to be Democrat. We know Texas is going to be Republican.
Well,
and
might change in a few years. Give it a few more years of open borders.
That's true. Well, that's another thing. Yeah. Biden's letting in millions and millions and millions.
I was going to say you don't have to prove your citizenship to vote, but
they're already getting driver's licenses. They'll all have even if they can't drive, they'll all have driver's licenses. So America is
refuse to see this. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. So America is pathetic in terms of its election process. I mean, it's not even it's beyond surreal. It's like Mad Max. I mean, it's just.
No, I agree with you, but I think both sides, if you want to call them sides, Democrats and Republicans, they're both, did all.
Well, of course,
shenanigans.
Well, you look at Bush in 2000 with the.
And Trump too.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, look,
his hats.
Trump's people initiated 64 court cases challenging the vote, and they lost in the courts in all 64, and they lost to in front of judges appointed by Trump. It was thrown out. So I don't know.
You're a big
Well, they
advocate
didn't
of
hear the
administration of
cases,
US
though.
forces.
That's the issue.
That's a real octopus. That's like the 346 people around the Kennedy assassination that died mysteriously. That gets a little too conspiratorial for my taste. I know you're right. Every election since George Washington has been corrupt. I agree with that. But they're all sides, all contending
Well, of
sides.
course, no, I didn't say it was just one. So I just happened to mention Kennedy and LBJ.
Jeff,
But of course they are.
What's more
Well,
interesting to me is,
you
Jeff,
know,
do I hear you saying there's not going to be a switcheroo? You know, George Clooney's dream and Obama's dream of getting him out at the last minute.
I don't know.
It's the carcass. Really, this guy 4 more years?
I don't know. I mean, remember,
No way.
Biden is completely surrounded by his family, his wife Jill, and his brother and sister, and
and Hunter.
Pressure's going to mount. The pressure's going to mount.
And he may get put, but even if it's Kamala Harris, they're still going to be able to rig the votes in the necessary states. I heard Tucker Carlson say 30 million. I don't believe it, but I know 11 or 12 million immigrants have flooded into the country. So I sure would not, even though Trump deserved to win in 2020 and he will likely deserve to win in 2024. I think the Democrats could put, Mickey Mouse, and he's going to win because they're going to rig the hard drives, and they're going to steal the vote because they've got the state capitals in the key states to do it.
What I was going to say is, I agree pretty much 99%. And as far as the both sides issue, I think it's a completely fair. I don't think it's even a controversial statement to say with the Bush administration, when everybody had that high after 9/11, Republicans were driving the bus. And what did the Republicans do with the bus? They decided to start several wars and lost all of them. So I think it's fair to say that Republicans were driving the bus in the Bush years. And then starting in the Obama years, you had to switch where Democrats really became the top dog. And it became to a point where Republicans are losing the ability to even contest Democrats at this point. It's just a permanent. I think the Republicans are becoming kind of, literally a permanent minority party. And it's just going to get worse over the next 5 years. And my theory on I keep meaning to write about this on the blog too. I keep meaning to write this, but my theory, I actually agree with Jeff on this, so a Democrat's going to win the election no matter what. It doesn't even matter who it is. The Democrat's going to win. It's predetermined.
Are you hedging? Because you said it was going to be Biden.
Well, I did say that, so let me finish. So I think, let me finish my statement. So yes, last show, Jeff, in the previous show, I told Billy Bob that I'm sure they're not planning to replace Biden. So I think what's happening here, Jeff, is what you said. So there is pushback because I think there are Democrats that are donors who are genuinely unhappy because it's so obvious that Biden is a mental vegetable. However, the people who are in the White House with him, his cabinet, especially his family. I mean, the thing is, if Biden was resigned or just didn't run again, do you think they would just be giving millions to Hunter Biden that he could go and smoke crack in the White House? Hell no. So, I mean, it's just, if your family member is president of the United States, I mean, that's just like winning the lottery every day for the rest of your life. I mean, it's just, it's such a godsend. So, of course, the Biden crime family does not want to let go of that. I mean, if he's just catatonic and they have to push him around for 4 years, it doesn't matter. They do not want to let that go. But there is pushback in the rest of the Democratic Party who are just like, we would like someone competent. But I think anything short of just straight up assassinating Biden, I don't think is going to work. I think because unless they have a primary, and the DNC is a corporation, so they don't have to do that. So they can just pick a guy, and as far as I can tell, they're not going to pick someone besides Biden. I think you can't force Biden to not run if the dude himself does not want to, and his family is telling him to not drop out. I mean, really, no matter how? I guess my question for everybody is, no matter how unhappy all these Democrats are, what can they really do about it?
Well, ultimately, they're going to force Biden off the ticket, and he'll either have a health issue where it won't be up to him, or he'll just step down. But there's no way. I mean, it was obvious after the debate, right? You saw they allowed this opinion, right? They allowed this opinion to proliferate all across their establishment media apparatus, where Biden is too old, he has to go. So there's no doubt in my mind Biden will go. My question is, have they negotiated an agreement with Trump where they're going to allow Trump to be the next president? So that's the big question to me, because I agree that with Jeff, any free and fair election, Trump will win. But are they going to allow a free and fair election because they've come to an agreement with Trump behind the scenes and Trump sold out, which I think is quite possible? Or are they going to rig it and put in either Kamala Harris or my governor, what's his name, Gavin Newsom?
How are they going to force? I mean, you said they're going to force Biden. I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, it's one thing, because I do agree with you. That's the media turned on him, because like that ABC interview.
They're puppets. They don't have sovereignty. Well, they get dictated to.
I guess what I'm saying is that ABC interview that followed the debate, that I think was actually, not only was that a bad interview, it was the first hostile interview Biden has had that was definitely a hostile interview. And I was like, wow, that was I think that's the first time he's actually had a hostile interview as far as soft instead of.
And to me, that makes it obvious that he's out.
That's the thing. They want him out, but because like I want a pony and $1 million.
You're nobody, Ian. You're not.
What are they going to do?
We've already established there's never been a free and fair election in America.
Right. But what I'm saying is,
I want to ask Jeff, when Trump is elected, I agree. I think Trump has got the edge with all the criminality that's going to go on. What he thinks a Trump administration is going to look like in the next 4 years.
Before I do, Carla, I do want to point out, Trump had those 64 cases of whatever you said, and he lost every one of them, and some of them were Trump appointees. Judges can be bought and sold and extorted and extorted. Who was the guy? I actually interviewed the people that published it in English, the German author, prostitutes. I was a whore for the CIA.
Oh, Smedley Butler.
No. I can't find it. But anyway,
George White.
No, it's a German guy. Otto
Galen.
Otto somebody. Anyway, he talked about. When the CIA wanted something from a journalist, they would first try flattery, then they would try bribery, and then
threats,
blackmail. And they said, and then if that didn't work, you get a knock on the door, and there's literally two guys in black suits with briefcases, and that's it. You either do what they say, or you're dead, or your family's dead.
Yeah, I agree with all that, but 64 cases, that involves hundreds of people.
Yeah, I don't know.
But anyway, I don't know. Let's not go down that road. What do you think Trump is what's it gonna look like? I want to know.
Well, Trump. Well, first off, I voted for Trump, then, and I will vote for him again. Although it's a totally wasted vote because I'm in Oklahoma and
it's a red state.
The Republicans, it's 75% Republican anyway. But and I'm a registered Democrat. But the only thing that gives me hope, and he's a demagogue. He is a complete and total demagogue. He is maybe not as corrupt as Biden, but he's got casinos, so he works with the mafia. I mean, he's not clean. But at least he can run a multi-billion-dollar company, and so I think he can run a government, better than Biden can. I think the only hope that he gives me is that he has promised to get to stop Ukraine in a week, and I don't know what that would be, other than he just tells Zelensky, get the fuck out of there, and we're going to get someone in there to negotiate with the Russians, and that's the only thing that gives me any hope. It's really curious. It was all buried, and I've got this list somewhere. But when Trump was president, poor people actually did better. There are actual statistics to show that minimum wage workers did better. Poor and minority people had higher levels of home ownership. And so, but no one will talk about it because no one wants to give him any credit for doing anything nice for Americans. I have no hope for Palestine because
there is none.
They will continue. Trump or Biden will continue to try to destroy West Asia, the Middle East. Gosh, Biden or Trump, and this is what we have to choose from.
Yeah, the world is laughing.
In the world's greatest democracy. I mean, it's pathetic. It is pathetic. And Biden's going to be 84, and Trump's going to be 80 something when he finishes. I mean, it's just awful. And he's better than Biden. But that's not saying much.
I made a prediction that maybe
foreign
we'll
policy, domestic policy. Biden is wretched on foreign policy.
He's the expert.
Well, and also Trump will try to stop the 2 or 3 million immigrants, flooding across the border. That's the other thing that would be very helpful with Trump.
I think we all hate Biden. Neither of us are wedded to Trump, but if I were an American, I'd vote for him because NATO is scared shitless of this guy basically pulling out, and they're always all of the NATO thing was about Trump proofing, the aid and all that. So I like that about him, but that's about it.
Here's the problem with Trump, and actually, because I'm a reformed, I call myself a reformed Bernie bro, because when Bernie Sanders,
you can count me there too.
Yes,
long time ago now.
Well, and I stopped the second Bernie sold out. I stopped supporting him, and the second time around, I didn't support him because it's like, why are you giving him a second chance after he sold out? So for me, it wasn't quite as bad with Trump, but still, I gave Trump his chance. And I'm not going to give him a second chance. And the reason why is because we had 4 years of Trump, and the thing is that almost all of the stuff Trump did, good or bad, was reversed within the first week literally the first week Biden took office. Why? Because Trump is very arrogant and he can't be bothered to educate himself about what he's dealing with. So he jumped into the White House. He signed a bunch of almost every single thing Trump did was an executive order. Why? Because that was the easiest way to do it. He was too lazy to get stuff through the legislature. So the second Biden sat down, there was even that video clip that went viral where Biden was signing executive orders, looked up, and was like, I don't even know what I'm signing. They just reversed. They just gave him a stack of executive orders that reversed all the executive orders Trump did. So it's just like, even if by some weird, I think I agree with Jeff, it's incredibly unlikely. But even if we did have Trump for another 4 years, what is the point? They're just going to day after Trump leaves.
Prediction is J.D. Vance will be president by 2026. Trump will be too uncontrollable during his first year, and they'll figure out a way to either JFK him or he'll get impeached out of office.
Here's a new one. They put in George Clooney. There you go.
I don't think Trump will make any effort to get out of Ukraine. None whatsoever. Whoever he has with him will talk him out.
He's got a beef. He's got a legitimate beef. Ukraine really tried to fuck him.
Steve Bannon has his ear. it's what Steve Bannon says or Steve Miller says. That's what goes. In a certain sense, Trump has a kind of dementia of ignorance. He doesn't know what's going on.
Dementia of ignorance.
He couldn't find Ukraine on a map. So,
Okay.
you know, he's totally dependent on the whims of what people around him tell him. If Pompeo and Bolton in your cabinet, you have to be a fool. I mean, to not put them in your cabinet. He had nothing to do with that. I know. You know, he doesn't make his own decisions.
Well,
Ukrainians are very good. I will give them this. They are very good at pissing in the wind, though. I mean, I think any bridge Ukrainians had with a theoretical President Trump has been burned because they have dissed him over and over again. I think Trump is someone who takes things very personally.
Yeah.
Well,
he takes things like if you say
He's
make
a
a
vain
joke, insult
person.
Trump.
He's a very vain person. That's something you can trust.
If you insult him, he will still be mad about it 20 years later. I think that's the kind of guy he is.
Jeff,
Okay,
you
I
had
think
a
we've
comment?
exhausted. Go ahead.
Trump, yes.
I just wanted to say one nice thing would be the Schadenfreude of Trump getting elected and opening up investigations on Hunter Biden. I mean, real investigations on Hunter Biden and the Biden mafia in Delaware, and all this scuttle, just the sewage of corruption. That he might do that, you know, he might do. And another thing, he did try to release all of the files on Kennedy, and the CIA came in and said no at the last. Probably because two guys in black suits showed up with briefcases.
More likely because he knew that was a good thing to do as PR, public relations.
Yeah.
That's Bannon, white Christian nation. That's what Bannon wants.
All right, guys.
White Christian nation. Look,
I'm sure we could talk about Trump and Biden for long, but I don't know how much time Jeff has, and I really wanted to get just his opinion on one more topic, which is France, which he mentioned.
Me too. One more topic.
If you still have time, because I know the basics of financially, the place is in trouble, even with the Olympics coming up. He's the second most, least approval rating president in the world. He's hated by left and right. I mean, I've seen Mélenchon, who is supposed to be the head of this new popular front. He said the right things about Ukraine and Israel-Palestine, but it looks like it might not be him. It might be Glucksmann and another Eurocrat again. What's the mood in Normandy, and what's the situation like on the ground? I'd really like to know.
Well, very, very quickly, we need to go back to 2006. Jacques Chirac was the last president in France to actually even know that there's citizens out there who exist. Sarkozy, I don't have time to get into it, but he was CIA.
Hungarian too.
Yeah, he let his father, Pal Sarkozy, a Hungarian aristocrat. He was a CIA asset, and so his son was a CIA asset. His stepbrother was with Carlyle, was with the Carlyle Group, and his stepmother married Frank. What is it? Frank? One of the guys that started the CIA. Frank Wisner. His stepmother married Frank Wisner Jr., the son of one of the 10 original guys that started the CIA, and he worked and headed up AIG, which is the insurance company that insures the CIA. So
beautiful.
Yeah. So Sarkozy led in the CIA, and he also took back de Gaulle's keeping France out of NATO since 1966. And once that happened, that France was finished. It's over. And so the CIA now is in the Élysée, the White House of France. And so France is now a real Western puppet. And I don't know how, other than some kind of a de Gaulle that comes along and tries to rectify it. Hollande was a supposed socialist. He is a neocon, neoliberal, Manchurian candidate who just destroyed this country. His finance minister was Emmanuel Macron.
The bank teller, a Rothschild creation. Yeah.
Goldman Sachs. And so they started, and of course the European Treaty, the Lisbon Treaty in 2009, with all of the austerity. So France has had essentially, accounting with inflation, has had zero growth since 2009. I mean, it's literally almost zero growth since 2000. The social safety net, the nice post-war socialist system that helped everybody,
Crumbling, I imagine.
is being torn apart. And starting with Hollande in 2012, they opened the floodgates on immigration. And a lot of people don't know this, but unfortunately, Francois Mitterrand, when he was president from 1981 to 1995, back when they had 2 7-year mandates, he passed a law that foreign non-French can vote in France if they have a resident permit. Well, it's not as bad as the United States, but still hundreds of thousands of Africans and Arabs are flooding into France. They are not the nicest people in the world. We're not getting the brain surgeons and the engineers and the rocket scientists. We're getting people who are not terribly educated, and unfortunately, they didn't have a future in their home, and so they're going to come here and live off the social system. And it's just like they're going to get driver's licenses in the United States. If you are from Africa or from the Ukraine or from a Middle Eastern country and you come here, you stay for 3 months and then you qualify to apply for a resident permit. Well, if an American tries, or a Russian tries, or a Serbian tries, or an Englishman tries, they're gonna wait a while to get their resident permit. But if you are an African or a Middle Easterner, hey, here's your resident permit, because the government is so infested with European supporters, wokeists, WEF. I mean, the termites from Brussels and the termites from the World Economic Forum, and the neoliberal neocon. The neocon, they're like termites in the French government. They're going to get a resident permit. They immediately get a no work minimum income. I think it's 600 euros a month. They get socialized medicine. They get housing. Subsidies immediately. And then there's all of these George Soros type NGOs that are in France that take these immigrants and walk them through to get a house, to get a place to stay, and how to milk the system for everything it's worth. And so they are now using, of course, that to say, oh, we can't afford this anymore in our socialist system. We have to cut this service out. We have to cut this service out. We can't afford this anymore. And so the other problem, so this unlimited immigration is destroying France. And I lived in the Arab world for 10 years. I spoke Arabic fluently. I have nothing against Muslims, and I have nothing. I worked in Africa for 10 years. I have nothing against them, but their presence is literally financially destroying the country. Because France has very generous benefits,
It's the feedback loop of imperialism is what it is. If France doesn't want immigrants, don't join the UK and the United States and bomb Libya back into the
well, that's what started it. Was when
Curtis
when they,
LeMay started
when
it.
they,
That's the original. That's what
Yeah.
happened. All this
Well,
500
Gaddafi
years of
warned about it,
colonialism.
yeah.
It's coming
Yeah.
back to haunt you in a
Yeah.
tiny little way. It's coming back to haunt Europe. It's coming back to haunt the U.S. But if if you're going to be belligerent to all these countries, if you're going to try to starve out Venezuela, then fuck you. Let the fucking immigrants come.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't.
Come on
That's an
in.
interesting. I mean, it's a really cynical strategy of changing the social fabric. Well, the social structures, right? Reducing the amount of socialism that French people can enjoy, because it's an attack on the social safety net. It's an attack on the robust social safety net, and they couldn't do it overtly, right? A politician isn't going to win an election saying, "Hey, we have to slash the social safety net." So they're going to bankrupt the country, and then they're going to change people's minds about the social safety net. So it's a very cynical strategy that I appreciate more after Jeff's analysis there.
It's a blueprint for fascism.
Okay.
Yeah, just
I would also like to point out, and it's people don't want to discuss it. People don't want. It's not advertised on television. It's forbidden to say it in the newspapers and in the media, but the police will release informally statistics. Crime is absolutely rampant now in France. Drugs are everywhere in France. Gangs with machine guns are in France. It's not as bad as the United States, but it's pretty bad. And just violent crime, grand theft auto, it is out of control. And the dirty secret is that 80 to 85% of the perps are immigrants.
Crime is down in the United States.
And no one wants to talk about it, but that's unfortunately the
crime
is
down in the United States.
Well, I don't live there. I live in France.
Jeff, that was
crime is down in the U.S. It's been down for years.
Jeff, that I think was valuable, but add to that the financial troubles. I think the credit rating of France has been downgraded twice. Just in this year alone. Macron got booted out of Africa, and it looks like New Caledonia might be next. All those free /cheap resources are gone, so he's got an axe to grind. And even if Mélenchon were to lead, which he's not going to, then what would he say? Social safety net, which means increased spending, which is impossible, which is bankruptcy.
The problem is that Mélenchon and the left are doing what Biden is doing. They want unlimited floods of immigrants to come into France for votes. It's exactly what they're doing. And when he says the French need housing, the French need this, it's the immigrants who are, and I hate to say it, but it is the immigrants who are prioritized right now in the administration and in the bureaucracy. Just to, so we had Hollande, a turncoat, a neocon. He was just as bad as George W. Bush. Passed the Patriot Law here, just carbon copy of the U.S. Patriot Law.
And signed, guaranteed the Minsk Agreement.
Yeah, the Minsk Agreement. The Minsk Agreement. And of course, then we had his protege Macron now in his second 5-year term. Macron is a Pygmalion, of Goldman Sachs. He is despised. He is hated by just virtually everybody.
Everyone.
He is arrogant. He is feckless. He is. That's why he pissed off everybody in Africa. He pisses off everybody he talks to. And so people don't. The reason that the right won so big in the European parliamentary elections, and it's been building, is this same thing. The French, the legacy French people and the legacy Muslim people. There's been Muslims here since the 1960s coming in. They're entrepreneurial, they work hard, they're socially conservative, they hate the wokeism. They hate, the WEF just as much as conservative, just as much as the general population in France. So France is socially conservative. It's in essence Catholic, De Gaulle Catholic. They cannot stand this wokeism. They cannot stand this, the crime and the violence. I mean, immigrants are every night on the television. There's a 12-year-old girl getting raped, and then the next night there's an 80-year-old. I'm not kidding. An 80-year-old women being raped in their beds. People coming through their windows and just knifing people. And unfortunately, they're immigrants. And so they could be MK Ultras. I don't know. Maybe they're MK Ultras. I don't know. But all I know is it's happening.
Well,
and
in
so
the 8th century, the Muslims were 200 miles from Paris.
Yeah.
So they have a long history of being in.
So the French are fed up. They hate Macron. The austerity starting to bite. We've had horrible inflation. Just in the last 6 months, we had a 10% raise on electricity in December and another 10% on top of that, 10% this month.
Well, you don't have access to the free uranium from Niger anymore. So
that's true.
That's right.
And so the left is against nuclear, and France had one of the greatest nuclear systems in the world, and it's being trashed. The country is going to hell. And enough people are aware of it that they're sick of the pseudo leftism. The left is big in Paris. The left is big in Bordeaux. The left is big in Marseille. And you go outside of the big cities, and it is conservative. And the proof is they won the European election. I just did a post, massive Orwellian, violent propaganda against Le Pen and her side. I mean, frightening propaganda since June 9th. They had, for the last year and a half, the French took the damn Russia Gate from the United States and did the exact same thing. And
Germans too, yeah.
Putin is controlling Le Pen. Le Pen is a Putin tool. And
also a Nazi. Like they always use his father. Very different from his father.
Yeah, very different. And so I went to a family dinner in Paris after Evelyn and I got back from China for a month at the end of May. These are sophisticated, educated bourgeois people, and during the lunch, Putin. Of course, I didn't say anything, but because I was there for the family. But it works. This brainwashing has worked. Then this, the Goldstein. Remember in the movie 1984, they put a picture of Goldstein up, on the TV screen, and 2 minutes of hate. Well, I am not exaggerating that we have had 1 month of hate in France against the right. And
we have a shared hero who has the same kind of attitude towards family dinners in Paris, and that's Pepe Escobar.
Yeah.
He absolutely says these guys are like brains mush.
Totally. It's just awful. And so they won by a significant margin, the European legislator. And then Macron petulantly dissolved the parliament 1 month before or 2 months before the Olympics were supposed to start. He didn't even tell his prime minister, Gabriel Attal, and nobody knows what the hell he was thinking, other than he's such a megalomaniac and he is such a self-absorbed, Adonis, that he just, blew a fuse and did it. In the first round,
Ryan, I don't know.
The first round, the right won again, and they were destined to win the second round. And now I have to back up. The problem is in France, there is election fraud. There are 82 municipalities, and they're not small. There are 82 municipalities with electronic voting machines, which are enough to throw a significant number of votes. And I don't have, and this is the other thing they do. Well, we don't have time, but they use propaganda like they were like this. And what people don't know is that actually, in fact, I still have it. Everybody's saying the left won. No, the left didn't win.
Oh yeah,
the right won. Look at that top bar. That top bar is Le Pen.
Rassemblement National. That is the Le Pen party.
This is Le Pen. The second one is Mélenchon, and the third one is Macron. And if you add 1 more million right wingers down at the bottom, various parties, and then the Republicans, they won 50% of the vote, and everybody's talking like they lost. And so we now have 50% of the people who are, although the problem is that 39 of the Republicans have jumped in bed with Macron, but the others haven't. And so that has not helped the right. Out of the 68, more than half went to Macron. But look at these numbers. I mean, the people have voted. We are sick of the left, and we are sick of Macron. And they even rigged the election. The Macron and Mélenchon got together, and if you have more than 12.5% of the vote in the first round, you can stay in the second round. It's not a two-horse race in France. So sometimes in a tight race, you will a lot of times have three, and sometimes 4 in the second round. So what they did, because they all got over 12.5%. And so what Macron and Mélenchon did is they colluded to remove each other. So if Mélenchon came in second place in this voting district, then Macron would bow out. If Macron won in this district, Mélenchon would bow out, so that they would force the people to either vote for Le Pen or 300. What was it? I forgot how many they did it to. It's never been done before like this. They literally stole the election.
And even with all those shenanigans, the right still did far better.
And the most vicious Orwellian, Goldstein. I mean, you cannot believe what we've been through for the last month. It's like Big Brother. And they still, I keep trying to tell people, they still won. So these people will be totally ignored. They have no voice. They don't exist. And it's going to come back to haunt these people, because eventually the moral majority, this adds up to 50%, by the way, 50%. And eventually there's going to be an explosion, and these people the people are going to say, enough of this shit. So that's what's happened.
I have a question for Jeff, but first I want to say that my neighborhood, Spanish is now the lingua franca. It's the main language. It's delightful. I'm so glad to be rid of white Americans. I hate white Americans. I live among African Americans and Spanish people coming from countries that were bombed by white Americans. I'm overjoyed.
You have 3 white Americans here. You know.
I did not bomb anybody. I did not bomb anyone.
I don't identify as white.
Jeff, Confucius and the current Communist Party. What are the parallels between Confucian thought and the way the Communist Party in China is structured?
Well, that's a whole nother show.
Oh, yeah.
I actually had Eric Arnaud on the show. He's a member of the China Writers Group, Bumble Buddhist. He was a robed Buddhist for 20-something years. I mean, a real Buddhist. And we had a show, is communism compatible with Buddhism, Confucianism? There's a lot of commonalities. And he said, yeah, they're perfectly aligned. They're perfectly aligned. So
Look, a topic for the next time, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
You've
Okay.
been really, really generous with your time, and
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
and as a 70-year-old, I have got to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, that's what I
we
was
will-
thinking too.
How old are you, Carlo?
76.
Woohoo! Wow.
On my
Jeff, I
last
hope you'll
leg.
come back, visit us on another episode. Thank you so much for all your time. We will reconvene. Go ahead.
Please send me. Is this on YouTube? What do you do?
Yeah,
Are you-
YouTube.
okay.
Send you the link.
Then I'll download it and I will get it transcribed.
As a final thought, Brian had this question. Do you know if the overseas territories, I think it works like Puerto Rico and the US overseas territories, they don't have the vote in France, do they?
Oh, yes. The
They do.
Dom-Toms? Oh, of course. They have the Euro. That's France,
Oh.
baby. France has more time zones than Russia.
Well, there you go, Brian. I didn't know that.
The sun is setting somewhere in France and it's rising in another place in France.
It's a vast
Because
empire.
Thank you.
That's interesting. And then Paulie's last statement is absolutely correct. We will end on that note, but that does looks like it's the case. So we'll reconvene on Tuesday. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, especially Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a great weekend.
Bon weekend. Bon weekend.
Bon weekend. And may Spain win the European.
Yeah, we lost. We weren't very good this year. Talk